In the fall of 2013, New York law enforcement released footage showing Mayor of Monticello Gordon Jenkins having a power-tripping meltdown following his arrest for DWI. After being taken into custody, he verbally abused the officers at the station, telling one of them, "I'm the one that hired you in this job, man." The police tried to professionally address Jenkins as sir and then mayor, but Jenkins sternly refused both in the obscenity-laced tirade. He flippantly asked to be called the N-word, adding, "Because that's what I am when I'm right here in handcuffs." He then threatened to come back at the officers if they pursued charges against him. During his outburst, Jenkins also ripped a clock off the wall and threw it out the door. The incident marked his third arrest during 5 years as mayor. He'd previously pleaded guilty to charges of selling fake goods. In 2011 and in 2012, he was arrested for punching a police officer. In November of 2014, he pleaded guilty to the DWI charge, and in January of 2015, he was sentenced to 45 days in jail for assaulting the officer. In the spring of 2015, the state Supreme Court ruled to remove him from office. Number 8. Bob and Nadine Menendez. U.S. Senator Bob Menendez and his wife Nadine were indicted by a federal grand jury in September of 2023 on multiple criminal charges. The couple faced 3 charges, each of conspiracy to commit bribery, conspiracy to commit honest services fraud, and conspiracy to commit extortion under color of official right. 3 businessmen, Wael Hannah, Jose Uribe, and Fred Davies, were named in the indictment. The senator and his wife were accused of using the former's power and influence to protect and the senator and his wife were accused of using the former's power and influence to protect and enrich the businessmen and benefit the government of Egypt. Davies, who reportedly had ties to the Genovese crime family, was alleged to have provided the couple with gold bars and considerable sums of cash. In exchange, Menendez promised to pressure President Joe Biden to nominate a U.S. attorney for the District of New Jersey that could be influenced. Regarding the prosecution of Davies, as chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, Menendez also used his influence to benefit Hannah, whom Nadine had known prior to marrying him. 40-year-old Hannah, originally from Egypt, operated ISEG Halal in New Jersey. The company had recently been named the sole entity in charge of authorizing that any food product imported into Egypt had been prepared according to Islamic law. Menendez reportedly improperly advised and pressured an official at the United States Department of Agriculture to protect Hannah's monopoly. Communication with the latter was facilitated through Nadine, who was promised money by Hannah in the form of a no-show job at his company. Around the same time, Menendez disclosed sensitive information from Senate briefings to his wife, who forwarded it to an Egyptian official. Menendez told her in a text, "I'm going to sign off this sale to Egypt today. Egypt, 46,120 target practice rounds and 10,000 rounds, tank ammunition, $99 million. Businessman Jose Uribe bought the couple a Mercedes-Benz C300 convertible worth more than $60,000 in exchange for the senator intervening in the New Jersey state criminal prosecution of an associate of his. After Nadine took possession of the luxury vehicle, she received a text from Uribe asking if she was happy, to which she responded, "I will never forget this." When the authorities raided the couple's home in June of 2022, they found traces of the bribes, including 2 1-kilogram gold bars, 11 1-ounce gold bars, and over $480,000 in cash, the bulk of which was stuffed into envelopes and hidden in clothing, closets, and a safe. The couple maintained they were innocent and discriminated against, and the case was ongoing as of the latest updates. Number 7. James Hooker. While teaching at Enoch's High School in Modesto, California, in the early 2010s, James Hooker became involved in a relationship with his student, Jordan Powers. It came to light after the latter's mother, Tammy, had reported them to the police. The tryst made national headlines in 2012 when Hooker quit his job and left his wife and 3 daughters to move in with Powers, a high school senior who was 18 years old at the time. The couple gave several media interviews in the aftermath, declaring that what they had was true love. They also wanted to alleviate suspicions that inappropriate contact had occurred between them prior to Powers turning 18. Even though they'd known each other since she was 14, the couple went on Dr. Phil, where Tammy accused Hooker of brainwashing her daughter. Her statement would fall in line with the general public view that the former teacher had abused his power to seduce the teenager. In the midst of the media frenzy, Power was contacted by a woman named Nicole Miller, who claimed that Hooker had taken advantage of her in 1998. They'd met while he was a business teacher at Davis High School in Modesto, and Miller, who wasn't of the legal age of consent, was a senior at Bayer High. Miller would report that she'd met Hooker at a Future Business Leader of America conference and that he took advantage of her while she was struggling with depression. The police had already been investigating Hooker's relationship with Powers when Miller's accusations surfaced. In April of 2012, Hooker was arrested on one charge of oral copulation with a minor for the incident, which dated back 14 years. At the time, Powers broke with him, telling the media, "I lost everything for this guy. I lost my senior year and I gave up all my friends at high school because they didn't agree with it." Subsequent reports, however, indicated that they'd resumed the relationship, much to the despair of Powers' mother. Miller pleaded no contest to his charge in the summer of 2013. He was required to register as an offender in order to serve 4 years of probation. Number 6. Ivan Estrada. In November of 2023, the mayor of a city in the central Mexican state of San Luis Potosí was taken into custody for allegedly abusing his power while in office. An investigation indicated that Ivan Estrada had diverted $345,485 from the Matehuala City Council payroll towards his own benefit. He was also accused of hiring people in no-show jobs and suspected of working with the cartels. A recording of a man whom the authorities later confirmed as Estrada was leaked by a journalist in May of 2023. In it, the mayor spoke to an unidentified person and boasted about his cartel ties. "I am transparent and I work with the cartel transparently," he was heard saying, before adding, "Whatever the cartel tells me, here it is, and whatever the cartel deserves, here it is." It wasn't clear to which cartel he was referring, but the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, Familia Michoacana, Gulf Cartel, and Zetas were known to operate in several cities across San Luis Potosí. Following his arrest, Estrada vehemently denied the allegations and instead accused San Luis Potosí Federal Deputy Alejandro Segovia of being involved with organized crime. Number 5. George Athanasio. In November of 2023, the leadership of the All Saints Greek Orthodox Church off West McMurray Road in Canonsburg, Pennsylvania, met with local police to report that bank checks were missing and had been deposited into an unauthorized PNC account. An investigation was launched, which discovered that Father George Athanasio, aged 38, was the only person within the church who had a PNC ATM card. A search of his apartment produced the card, along with further evidence indicating that Athanasio had embezzled more than $117,000 from the church's bank account. Upon being questioned by law enforcement, the priest admitted to stealing the money due to personal hardships. He revealed his MO, which consisted of signing church checks and depositing them into his own account before transferring the money to a different account and withdrawing cash from it using an ATM. Athanasio admitted that he hadn't been authorized to handle the funds and had thus abused his position of power within the church. He was charged on 223 felony counts of theft by unlawful taking, forgery, bad checks, and access device usage. Updates from December of 2023 indicated that the priest had stolen from his church to fuel his gambling addiction. Number 4. John Kovat. On April the 18th of 2018, John Kovat, a police officer from Lorain, Ohio, pulled over his daughter's boyfriend, 18-year-old Mahai Coleman, without just cause. Several other youths were in the vehicle at the time, including Kovat's 18-year-old daughter, Caitlin. The officer led Coleman to the back of his cruiser. The incident was captured by the police vehicle's cameras, and when the young man asked why he was going to jail, Kovat told him, "We'll make it up as we go." Kovat then spoke with Gloria Morales, who emerged from her home nearby. Two of Morales' children were also in Coleman's car, and Kovat asked to search the woman's house, claiming his daughter's laptop was inside. Morales initially agreed, but then changed her mind and told Kovat to get a warrant when he threatened to give her daughter a $300 fine for not wearing her seatbelt. Up to that point, Kovat hadn't realized that his daughter was also in the back seat of Coleman's vehicle. When he saw her, the man released Coleman and dragged Caitlin to the back of his cruiser as she was frantically screaming and crying, telling him that he couldn't arrest her without a reason. When Coleman asked why she was being detained, Kovat told him that he was concerned for his daughter's well-being before he drove off with her in the car. As reported by the Chronicle Telegram, an internal investigation revealed that the officer's ex-wife had told him a few days prior that she'd found both Coleman and Caitlin, both of whom were 18, having relations in her home. She asked the former to leave and he allegedly threatened her. Caitlin then called her father and said, "If I can't be with him, I don't want to be here anymore." He interpreted Caitlin's words as her threatening to self-harm, which ultimately prompted him to take her into custody. Kovat told investigators that he and his ex were against their daughter's relationship, adding that he didn't think Coleman was a good person, as he'd been arrested for marijuana possession. Following the internal investigation, Kovat was fired on May the 11th. He'd not only detained the teens without valid cause, but also tracked Caitlin down using police computers and ignored an emergency call to a nearby crash during the incident. Number 3. Miguel Hernandez. In the spring of 2022, footage started circulating online of a Miami cop brutally assaulting a handcuffed suspect. Bodycam videos of the incident, which had taken place on November the 27th of 2020, had only recently been disclosed to the public as the arrest was being investigated by the Miami Civilian Investigative Panel. On the aforementioned date, the police had been called to remove 20-year-old Julissa Burgos, who was sitting on the sidewalk outside a gas station. Before Burgos walked away, she put her cigarette out on the rear side door of Officer Miguel Hernandez's cruiser, leaving an ash stain. Burgos sat on the sidewalk in the moments that followed, but Hernandez ordered her to go to the police vehicle and clean up the stain. Burgos resisted, and the video then showed Hernandez and his partner forcing the woman on the ground, twisting her arms back and handcuffing her. She started crying, told the cops that she was pregnant, and screamed at them not to touch her. She was eventually placed in the back of the cruiser, where she continued behaving belligerently. As tensions escalated, Burgos spat at Hernandez. Immediately, the officer punched her in the face. As shown in the body cam footage, he then grabbed the handcuffed woman by the throat, yanked her out of the car, and slammed her face first into the pavement. Burgos was unconscious for roughly 15 minutes. Several men in the area shouted at Hernandez, saying, "You didn't have to do that," and "That's a female, bro!" Even Hernandez's partner was seen staring at him in shock, yelling, "What the hell did you do?" Paramedics were called to the scene, and photos taken in the aftermath showed Burgos with massive swelling on the side of her face. She was charged with assault on a police officer and criminal mischief, but the charges were eventually dropped. An internal investigation was launched, and months after the incident in June of 2021, Hernandez resigned from the force and was thus reportedly allowed to keep his pension. Updates on the matter from 2022 indicated that he'd faced no charges for the incident, which was described by the Civilian Investigative Panel as shocking and disgusting. Today's topic was requested by Dan2Fly and Grandma Dale 8722. If you have any other topics you'd like to learn about, subscribe and let us know in the comments section below. Number 2. Grace Rose Byers. An NYPD officer was arrested in October of 2023 after she tried to sell drugs to a federal informant. On October the 17th, Officer Grace Rose Byers, aged 37, gave the informant a sample of what she described as top-quality fentanyl in a Mentos container. During the negotiations, the Bronx-based cop revealed that she could sell the informant a kilo of heroin for $25,000 and 800 grams of fentanyl, with pricing to be subsequently determined depending on the drug's purity. Federal agents reported that while working desk duty at an NYPD facility, Byers had multiple meetings with the informant and discussed selling kilogram quantities of narcotics. The corrupt cop met them again on October the 19th in Yonkers and handed over packages containing suspected narcotics, including a kilogram and 400 grams of heroin and 640 grams of fentanyl, labeled 640 manzana. Byers was arrested later that day. Afterwards, the police raided the home she shared with her boyfriend, 42-year-old Cesar Martinez. Cops found additional narcotics that the latter was trying to throw out, along with a kilogram press machine. Martinez was arrested without incident. Byers, who in a 2020 Instagram post had stated, "I will never apologize for picking a career I love to do," quit the force in the aftermath. Updates indicated that she was under house arrest with an ankle monitor pending the findings of an investigation. Police Commissioner Edward Caban publicly stated that if found guilty, Byers tarnished the shield that she wore. She and Martinez both faced the possibility of lengthy prison sentences. Prior to the incident, Byers, who'd been a cop since 2012, had been placed on modified duty since 2020 after being accused of misconduct. While the circumstances of the latter allegation remained unclear, Byers also had a history of using excessive force. One incident, dating back to January of 2014, had resulted in 27-year-old Sean Young suffering a fractured foot. A civil rights case ensued that was settled in Manhattan federal court for $30,000. After number 1, we'll line up a few more vids about public officials whose power also got to their bloodstream and head. Stick around if you haven't seen those releases yet. Number 1. Sergio Alvarez. While working the graveyard shift as a police officer in West Sacramento, California, Sergio Alvarez forced himself on multiple women in 2011 and 2012. His victims were down and outers, as lead Yolo County prosecutor Garrett Hamilton would later describe them. They were escorts or drug addicts, whom Alvarez felt no one would believe if they ever came forward. Towards perpetrating the assaults, he either used leverage, such as pending warrants and drug charges, or simply told the women he was going to arrest them and detained them until they submitted. The man, who was in his mid-30s and married at the time, carried out some of the attacks while in his patrol vehicle and on duty. After one woman came forward with the allegations, Alvarez was suspended. An internal investigation was launched, in the aftermath of which the disgraced cop was fired and arrested. During the trial that ensued, one of the victims, identified as Terry G., testified that she was accosted by Alvarez in late August of 2012. She was walking to a friend's house in the early hours of the morning when Alvarez detained her, saying he had a warrant against her. He then made Terry perform oral copulation in a dark, abandoned alley. Another victim, Anna B., a heroin user and self-professed escort, reported that she was forced to have relations with the cop against her wishes multiple times since September of 2012. Kayla R., Karen N., and Rochelle G. gave similar accounts of being abused by Alvarez under the threat of arrest or while being intimidated by his position of authority. In 2014, the cop was found guilty on multiple counts of kidnapping, abuse, and forced oral copulation, for which he was sentenced to 205 years to life in prison. 6 of his victims subsequently launched a civil suit against the city of West Sacramento and were ultimately awarded a combined settlement of $4.1 million. Number 8. Robert Telles. On the night of September the 2nd of 2022, Jeff German, an investigative journalist for the Las Vegas Review-Journal, was brutally stabbed to death outside his Vegas home. Investigators used surveillance footage to ascertain that the 69-year-old reporter had been murdered by an assailant wearing an orange jacket and straw hat, who'd been lying in wait on the property. DNA recovered from beneath the victim's fingertips linked Clark County Public Administrator Robert Tellez to the violent crime. On September the 4th, police executed a search of Tellez's home, which reportedly led them to collect further evidence against him. He was taken into custody on suspicion of murder. According to subsequent reports on the matter, Tellez had long been embroiled in a contentious professional rivalry with German, who'd previously reported that the public administrator had created a hostile work environment and carried on an inappropriate relationship with a staffer. The journalist was working on a follow-up story about Tellez at the time he was killed. The 45-year-old suspect pleaded not guilty to murder charges in October of 2022. Number 7. Jeff Pines. In the fall of 2017, Jeff Pines resigned from his position as city manager of Freeport, Texas, amid rumors that he was the individual responsible for money disappearing from the city's budget. Upon his departure from office, the Texas Rangers and Brazoria County District Attorney opened up an investigation into the matter, which ultimately came to a head 8 months later, in June of 2018. Investigators determined that Pines, the former police chief, had siphoned approximately $223,000 in total from the city of Freeport. He reportedly obtained the money through a variety of methods, including by giving himself unauthorized pay raises, stealing utility and water payments from different companies, and collecting kickbacks from a pair of Houston-based contractors who won bids in the city. Freeport Mayor Troy Brimage indicated that the ordeal had prompted the city to review its governmental chain of command, and they no longer have city managers report solely to themselves as a result. Pines was held in Brazoria County Jail on theft charges. In January of 2020, he was sentenced to 10 years in prison for the kickback scheme. Number 6. Dante Zario. A Miami Beach parking enforcement officer was arrested on December the 14th of 2019 after it emerged that he'd been extorting a pair of private businesses in the area. 57-year-old Dante Zario was accused of demanding $1,000 each month from a local valet company called APS Parking LLC. In exchange, the parking officer agreed not to issue the company any parking citations. The valet owner, identified as Freddie Diaz, reportedly went to the police with details of Zario's bribery scheme, prompting investigators to organize a sting operation aimed at catching the city employee in the act. On the 14th of December, Zario received a $750 payment from Diaz, while the Miami Beach Internal Affairs Unit covertly recorded the conversation between the two men. Later that same day, Zario was taken into police custody on charges of extortion, bribery, and accepting an unlawful compensation or reward for official behavior. During questioning, the man allegedly confessed to extorting a second business, the Mr. Jones nightclub at 320 Lincoln Road. He reportedly received $400 from the establishment for not enforcing parking regulations. Zario, who'd worked for the city for roughly 2 decades, was fired from his position following his arrest. Number 5. Timothy Peter Solberg. Just before midnight on January the 15th of 2022, the police in West Fargo, North Dakota, were called to the home of Assistant City Administrator Timothy Peter Solberg after receiving reports of a domestic disturbance. Upon their arrival, officers learned that the 42-year-old man and his wife had just arrived home when they got into a physical altercation. Solberg allegedly grabbed the woman by the throat and threw her to the ground, causing her to lose consciousness after her head slammed against the wall. The victim was taken to the hospital while Solberg was reportedly uncooperative with law enforcement. The city employee faced a pair of felony charges in connection to the incident, one for aggravated assault and the other for resisting arrest. The ensuing internal investigation conducted by city officials determined that Solberg had violated a number of city policies during and after the domestic episode, and he was consequently terminated. Although he initially entered a not guilty plea, the man pleaded guilty to reduced charges of disorderly conduct and preventing arrest shortly before his trial was scheduled to begin. In May of 2022, Solberg was sentenced to 1 year of unsupervised probation and was also ordered to pay a $325 fine. Number 4. Bethan Sweeney. Massachusetts State Police received a call about a school bus driving erratically on the roadway on November the 17th of 2022. The caller, a passenger on the bus, reported that the driver was swerving in and out of the painted lanes, tried to merge onto Route 3 in the wrong direction, and ran a red light. State troopers pulled the bus over in the parking lot of the Friendly's restaurant on Route 139 in Pembroke. There were reportedly 28 teenagers and 2 adult supervisors on board at the time. They'd been picked up from the Hingham United Basketball Special Olympics closing ceremony at Plymouth High School and were supposed to be on their way back to Hingham High School. During the course of the traffic stop, officers asked the bus driver, 53-year-old Bethan Sweeney, to perform a series of field sobriety tests, all of which she failed. She refused the breathalyzer and was taken into police custody. Her charges included operating under the influence of liquor, child endangerment while operating under the influence, negligent operation, reckless endangerment of a child, and having an open container of alcohol. The student athletes were subsequently brought home safely by another bus driver, while Sweeney was held at the State Police Barracks in Norwell overnight. Number 3. Michael Browning. 71-year-old Michael Browning, the manager of Gunpowder Falls State Park in Maryland, was arrested on September the 27th of 2022 after he was accused of assaulting someone multiple times. The Baldwin resident was said to have committed the repeated abuse over the course of a 6-month period while he was employed by the Maryland Park Service. A spokesperson for the Baltimore County Police Department indicated that the incidents occurred on Gunpowder State Park property. Browning, who was described as one of the few remaining armed Maryland Park Service Rangers, was held without bond on several charges, including 7 counts of assault. The victim of the abuse was identified as a female park employee who'd met Browning as a teenager while attending a youth club run by his wife. After getting a job in the parks department, the unidentified woman, now in her 20s, entered into a years-long consensual relationship with Browning. When she attempted to end the romance, however, the man allegedly assaulted her 10 to 15 times. In October of 2022, a grand jury indicted Browning on charges related to his attacks on the former employee. He denied each of the allegations levied against him. Number 2. Linda Mahai. An Australian public servant was arrested by a New South Wales joint counter-terrorism team in Parramatta on January the 23rd of 2018. A federal police detective revealed in a subsequent press release that between February and October of 2015, 40-year-old Linda Mahai had made 5 Western Union transfers in which she sent money to the militant extremist group known as the Islamic State. Mahai was accused of soliciting a schoolgirl to wire sums ranging from $1,982 and $9,810. The money was reportedly intended for the woman's brother and not for the use of planning a domestic attack. Mahai, an Australian citizen who held no other citizenships and wasn't known to the police before her arrest, consequently faced 5 counts of intentionally making funds available to or collecting funds on behalf of a terrorist organization. The case took a dramatic turn in November of 2019 when Mahai had her criminal charges dropped and she was released from custody. The woman had been fired from her job while in prison on remand but missed the deadline to file an unfair dismissal claim with the Fair Work Commission and thus was unable to return to work. Number 1. Kelly Simpson. A 15-year-old high school student from Florida, identified only by the initials DJ, got into an argument with his parents about him stealing $100 on August the 12th of 2022. According to the Charlotte County Sheriff's Office, the teen then left the family's Port Charlotte home without taking his phone, bank card, or medication. When he didn't show up for school either, DJ was officially reported missing. The following day, local authorities received a tip that the missing student had last been seen at a residence in Punta Gorda. The individual whom investigators subsequently spoke to at the address in question indicated that DJ had in fact been there, but had been picked up in a black car by someone named Kelly on August the 15th. The teen's parents told police that the only Kelly they knew him to be acquainted with was his former English teacher at Charlotte High School, 31-year-old Kelly Simpson. Officers went to the latter's home and following a brief standoff at her front door, successfully recovered the missing teen from inside. Simpson was consequently arrested on a charge of interfering with the custody of a minor after she'd housed DJ. Despite knowing of his missing endangered status, it was later revealed that the teen had been enamored with his former teacher, had talked about her constantly, and had even brought coffee to her at school on occasion. Simpson was suspended from her teaching post and placed on administrative leave pending further investigation. Number 8. Oliver Banfield. In the early morning hours of July the 26th of 2020, a mother of 2 was attacked by a strange man while walking home alone in the West Midlands region of England. The victim, identified as 37-year-old Emma Homer, later recounted how she'd only been a few doors down from her Warwickshire house when she was suddenly accosted. She described how it seemed like her shadowy assailant was pretending to be a police officer as he allegedly shouted at her to get on the floor now before forcefully pulling her arms behind her back. The man's female companion eventually crossed the road to intervene, pulling him off of a terrified Homer. She reassured the latter that the man was simply drunk, at which point he got back in the victim's face and shouted, "Why are you following me?" The woman pushed him away, to which he responded by forcing her back onto the ground, holding her in a headlock, and repeatedly kicking her. In the incident's aftermath, Homer reported the assault to Warwickshire police but allegedly had to fight for a reaction from the authorities. The department subsequently apologized for the delay in the commencement of their investigation into the matter. Through the use of CCTV footage, detectives were able to identify Homer's attacker as an off-duty probationary officer named Oliver Banfield. The 25-year-old man had reportedly been quite intoxicated on the night in question and had become convinced that Homer had been stalking him and his partner. In March of 2021, Banfield pleaded guilty to assault by beating and was given a 14-week curfew, during which time he was prohibited from leaving his house between the hours of 7 p.m. and 7 a.m. He was suspended by the West Midlands Police, but later resigned from his position. Number 7. Emma Bewick. Officials with the South Wales Police Force learned that one of their constables had been stalking her ex-boyfriend, Gavin Burrows, over a period of weeks during October of 2021. The officer in question, 21-year-old Emma Bewick, had only been with the force for a matter of months before she became the subject of an internal investigation. According to subsequent reports, Bewick, a recent graduate of the University of South Wales, conducted a course of unwanted contact with Burrows by repeatedly showing up at his home unannounced, reaching out to him and attending at places where he frequents, including his place of work. Bewick ultimately admitted stalking without fear, alarm, or distress during the trial at Quimbran Magistrates Court. She was consequently given a suspended 10-week sentence. Following an accelerated misconduct hearing, the disgraced officer was fired from her position and barred from serving as a public official at any point in the future. Number 6. Wanda Vasquez. Wanda Vasquez, the former governor of Puerto Rico, was arrested on August 4th of 2022 for taking part in a bribery scheme while in office. It was subsequently reported that from December of 2019 through June of 2020, Vasquez had engaged in the alleged corruption with several co-conspirators, including a Venezuelan Italian bank owner, a former FBI agent, a bank president, and a political consultant. The scheme revolved around the prominent politician's efforts to finance her 2020 gubernatorial election campaign. According to the U.S. Department of Justice, an international bank owned by Julio Martin Herrera had been under investigation by Puerto Rico's Commissioner of Financial Institutions in connection to a series of suspicious, unreported transactions. In exchange for providing Vasquez's campaign with financial support, Herrera asked that the governor dismiss the commissioner scrutinizing his institution and appoint a new one of his choosing. Vasquez accepted the bribe and ultimately appointed a former consultant for Herrera's bank as the new Financial Institutions Commissioner in May of 2020. The former governor and her accomplices were each charged with conspiracy, federal programs, bribery, and honest services wire fraud, which carry a maximum penalty of 20 years in prison if convicted on all counts. Number 5. Brandon Wilkerson. An Indiana police officer encountered an unclothed man standing in the open doorway of a pickup truck while patrolling the Evergreen Plaza in Trail Creek in the early hours of August 12th of 2022. The officer approached the vehicle, which was reportedly parked in the lot outside Decoy's neighborhood bar and grill, at which point he realized that the individual appeared to have been engaging in intimate relations with a woman. The man, later identified as Brandon Wilkerson, was detained on charges of public indecency and public intoxication, as his blood alcohol content registered at nearly twice the legal limit on a portable breathalyzer test. It subsequently emerged that the 35-year-old suspect was actually a LaPorte police officer who'd been off duty at the time of the lascivious public incident. He was automatically suspended 5 days without pay in connection to his arrest. As of the case's latest updates, the LaPorte Police Merit Commission hadn't yet decided whether to hand Wilkerson any additional job-related punishment. Number 4. Nicole Miller. Scottish Police Constable Nicole Miller was accused of waging an extended campaign of psychological abuse and coercion against her former girlfriend between April of 2019 and August of 2020. As was detailed during the case's eventual trial in Falkirk Sheriff Court, the 31-year-old officer was alleged to have verbally abused her partner, Rochelle Kerr, even as the couple prepared to welcome their first child, who had reportedly been conceived through in vitro fertilization. During the course of their 4-year romantic involvement, Miller would regularly scream, shout, and swear at Kerr. The latter described how she'd eventually become withdrawn and felt trapped, controlled, and manipulated as a consequence of her partner's abusive behavior. Their relationship had experienced one of its many contentious boiling points when Kerr was still 35 weeks pregnant and had told Miller that she wanted to finish her pregnancy at her mother's house. The manipulative constable took issue with Kerr's decision to leave, however, and proceeded to hide her car keys so she couldn't escape. The relationship finally came to an end after the pair had the latest in a seemingly endless series of heated arguments in the late summer of 2020, tearing Kerr away from her recently born son. During the domestic abuse case's court proceedings, Miller vehemently denied her former partner's allegations, tearfully contending that it had actually been Kerr who'd acted as the antagonist of their unstable relationship. Number 3. Leonid Kosara. On February the 22nd of 2020, advertising mogul Sergei Staretsky was found dead inside the home of former Ukrainian Foreign Minister Leonid Kosara. The police indicated that 56-year-old Staretsky had suffered a fatal gunshot wound from a firearm belonging to the retired public official. Kosara and his wife, who were both home at the time of the deadly incident, claimed that the victim had inflicted his mortal injuries himself while in a separate room. However, investigators and prosecutors reviewed the circumstances of the death and concluded that Staretsky couldn't have shot himself. As the Kosaras contended, the National Police used forensic, ballistics, and molecular genetic tests to gather enough evidence to formally charge the former foreign minister with Staretsky's murder, and he was taken into custody the following month. On the evening of the shooting, the two men had allegedly gotten into a drunken argument in the kitchen that ultimately escalated into a physical fight. The altercation culminated with Kosara retrieving his weapon from the bedroom before returning to gun his friend down. If convicted of his murder charge, Kosara reportedly faced the possibility of spending up to 15 years behind bars. Number 2. Michael Davis. In the early hours of June the 23rd of 2021, an Arkansas teen was gunned down by a Lonoke County Sheriff's deputy during a traffic stop in the city of Cabot. It later emerged that the victim, 17-year-old Hunter Britton, had been test driving his truck after making repairs on his transmission when the officer, Sergeant Michael Davis, pulled him over near a body shop. A subsequent arrest affidavit detailed how, upon parking his vehicle on the side of the road, Britton got out and moved toward the bed of his truck, which had begun to roll backward toward Davis's patrol car. Believing Britton to have been retrieving a weapon, the officer immediately brandished his service weapon and fired a single round into the young man's neck. Davis placed Britton's passenger under arrest while the motorist himself was transported to North Little Rock Hospital, where he ultimately succumbed to his gunshot wound. During the ensuing homicide investigation, detectives learned that Davis's body cam had only been turned on after Britton had been shot. It was determined that when the fatal round was fired, the victim hadn't been reaching for a weapon, as Davis believed, but for a jug of antifreeze, which he'd intended to use to stop the truck from rolling backwards. Although the officer claimed to have given Britton several commands to get back inside his vehicle, the victim's passenger testified that he'd heard no such directives prior to the gunshot. In March of 2022, Davis was found guilty of negligent homicide, but not guilty of manslaughter, and was consequently sentenced to 1 year in jail plus a $1,000 fine. Number 1. Hayaki Kumazawa. A former top Japanese government official was taken into police custody on June the 1st of 2019 on suspicion of murdering his own son. The 76-year-old suspect, retired agricultural vice minister Hayaki Kumazawa, told investigators that his son, Aikiro, had moved back in with his parents about a month prior to his death. Kumazawa further detailed how the family began regularly having tense arguments with one another following 44-year-old Aikiro's arrival. The latter, who reportedly suffered from a developmental disorder, was accused of physically and verbally abusing his father during the brief period in which they lived together. Kumazawa told the police that on the day of the fatal incident, his son had become enraged at the noise generated by the attendees of an athletic event being held at a nearby elementary school, allegedly concerned that Aikiro might try to cause some sort of harm to him or the others. Kumazawa grabbed hold of a knife and stabbed his son multiple times. The victim ultimately passed away due to massive blood loss. In December of 2019, reportedly taken into account that Kumazawa had suffered previous violent assaults at the hands of the victim, the Tokyo District Court sentenced the former public official to 6 years behind bars.
Thanks for watching. What laws would you change or introduce in your country had you had the power to do so?